I really kind of wanted to shift over to stuff that's been happening around the program, not necessarily on the field, and really talk about what's happening here with some of the recruiting class
Yep.
stuff that's been going on. So, for those of you that may not know, in recent days, so over the weekend, actually just hours after the Northwestern game, Ohio State was able to pick up a 3-star wide receiver recruit. He's actually a local kid from Pataskala, Jaden Rickets. He's someone that I think Ohio State sees a lot of promise in, and they really like his upside. And if there's one person on the staff that I trust to evaluate talent, it's Brian Hartline.
Yes.
So I don't think there's a whole lot to be worried about, even with the fact that he's just a 3-star recruit right now. And he's actually for the 2026 recruiting class. So what are your thoughts on Rickets?
So I actually watched his film as soon as I saw that he committed, because I was like, who is this kid? Saw he was the class of 2026. And the first thing in my mind was, just as what you said, well, if Hartline's picking him, then I trust it. I have no reason not to. So I watched him. I thought he has great body control. That was the first thing I noticed, especially at a young age. I think that for kids at that age to know how to maneuver their body while it's in the air, that's a very hard thing to do, especially combining the hand-eye coordination, knowing how to land. I thought he was very good at that. I'm excited. It's really good to see that Brian Hartline doesn't need to just go after the 5-star kids.
Yeah, we know he can land those kids. I mean, he does it almost every year.
Yeah, exactly.
And in that same 2026 class, got Chris Henry Jr. So
yeah, I can't wait to see him see him on the field. But like I see that. And I think it's been like almost like a tendency of his lately.
I agree with you there, Mark.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that was a great comment. Actually, I was happy I read that. But I mean, you look at him. You also look at guys like Bachman. You look at guys like I mean, shoot, I'm blanking on his name right now. Boggs. When but he wasn't even though he's decommitted from us. Lower rated kid. So it's really cool to see that Brian Hartline is doing that, especially getting the kids in Ohio. I'm in a lot of Twitter spaces, and what's really big to a lot of Buckeye fans is that we get kids out of Ohio.
Build that sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree with that. I mean, you look at the Jim Tressel area, he made sure that he did that. Urban Meyer did the same. He dig into the south a little bit more than Tressel did, but he still had that continuity with the Ohio, Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, all those areas, going to some areas where some coaches wouldn't go to. You got to do that. You got to find those type of athletes, find those type of players, especially kids that grow up loving this program. I think getting guys like Will Smith Jr. I think that I like that. I like getting guys like how am I blanking on his name right now? But you get the point.
Yeah, the overall arching point is Ryan Day and his staff, and specifically Hartline here, most recently has made it a point to make sure that the best kids in the state of Ohio stay in Ohio.
Exactly.
And, I think the biggest example of that is in the 2025 class, Tavan St Clair. He's a local kid, Bell Fountain, number 2 overall recruit in the country, plays at a small school, but has just killed it at every 7-on-7 camp, every single camp that he's gone to. So is the talent he's got working around him isn't really that good. And he's really, he elevated the talent as best as he could in the last couple of years. So, building that fence around Ohio, making sure you get the best kids, I think is important. Now, even though, Ricketts was the positive part of the recruiting news that happened, in the last couple of days, but unfortunately there has been some bad news on the recruiting front too. It was also reported on Sunday that Tarvos Arnold, linebacker, 4-star kid, He was actually, Tarvos Alford. He was going to decommit and flip to Miami. Now he is a Florida kid, so this isn't entirely out of left field. But at the same time, you would like to keep talented kids who are committed to you. And he'd been committed to the program since February, so it's not
For a
like
while.
it's not like this is a recruit who just committed in July and all of a sudden had a change of heart. But what are your thoughts on the Buckeyes losing Alford?
I think that a South Florida kid moving his commitment is part of course. I think that's a norm for that area for the players that come out of the area. And it's not an indictment on them. It's just how it goes, and it's understandable because Alfred's a really good athlete, really good linebacker. Number 9 linebacker in the nation on composite. So
yeah, and if they have to lose someone from this class, again, like I said, you never, in an ideal world, you don't lose anybody who's already committed to your class. But if you're going to lose someone, the linebacker spot isn't a horrible place for them to lose someone just because they've got Bogdan coming in. They've got into the 5-star linebacker coming in. And with Jim Knowles' system,
Petty John Lee. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They only play 2 linebackers at a time. So you don't have to have that position built up with as much depth as you do on the defensive line or the secondary or the wide receiver spot. So if this is going to happen, at the linebacker spot, it's not the end of the world.
No, it's not. And the linebacker, I think the linebacker room right now has a lot of depth. You would like to see them play better on the field, but I mean, you got Reese, you got Powers. I think that, and you have these guys coming in. I think there's a lot of talent in that room that could be progressed, and so Alfred leaving is not the end of the world, as you said. It's I like it. Like when I saw it, it sucked. It sucked, but I'm not upset. I mean, I was more upset about the news today.
Yeah, and let's get to that news. Yeah, Zahir Mathis, he announced on his X account that he was decommitting from Ohio State. He did mention that they were still a top school for him, but let's be honest, how many kids decommit and then end up recommitting to that same school? So
not many.
So more than likely he's gone, and he's an edge guy. So this one hurts a little bit more, and he's a big dude. He's 6'6", 260. He's a guy that they were probably going to put, as a defensive end, someone who they thought could rush the passer. He's a four-star recruit. So this one hurts a little bit, especially because in recent years, Larry Johnson hasn't quite built the depth at defensive end, that high level pass rush type of guy. So this one stings.
No, it does. I think that after taking away quarterback, after offensive lineman, defensive end is probably the biggest position in football right now, especially in college football, with quarterbacks being a little bit more athletic than they are in the NFL, or at least you see them more often.
Yeah.
Larry's had his years. He's had some good. I think last year was a good class for him. This year is kind of you still got Zion Grady. You still got him. And if I'm being honest, that makes me a little bit more happy knowing that he's more like a 225 guy, a little bit more bendy, longer, athletic.
Wait until he gets in mixed program.
Yeah.
Right up.
It turns into a D tackle.
Yeah.
But no, listen, I think the Mathis recruitment, as you said, once a kid decommits, it's all but over. I think that it would be a pipe dream to think that we would be getting him back. But what I did see earlier on Twitter today is that someone commented under there. He said, "There's a reason for this. Someone else is coming." So if that's the case, then I'll take it. But if not, this one hurts.
There have been some rumors, and for those that don't know, Jaem Stewart is still out there. And the rumor is the reason Zahir decided to decommit is because Stewart's coming in. He's the big fish left in this
Yeah.
class. He's a 5-star kid, defensive end, and Ohio State's competing against the best of the best for him. He's actually at the Oregon game, visiting Oregon while Ohio State was there.
Yeah.
So he's made an official visit to Ohio State as well, and I this week and the Michigan week. The Michigan week is going to be the biggest weekend for the recruiting, for finishing this recruiting class, firming everyone up,
Yep.
and making sure that they can keep this class together, and maybe even adding a Jaem Stewart, because Mathis and Alford, them leaving, they're not the only guys that Ohio State's going to have to worry about leaving. If the Buckeyes end up losing Naeem Ford, who is a 5-star corner, again, one of the cornerstones of this recruiting class. It's one of the first kids that they got earlier here in the spring. And he's been taking official visits everywhere. Of course, on Twitter or X, he's come out and said, "Hey, I'm a Buckeye. I'm locked in," but his actions keep saying differently. And now he's been trending to Auburn, or now there's rumbles about him going to Oregon, which would really sting. So they've got some work to do to kind of finish up this class.
No, they do. And
to answer your question here, Steve, I think he'd be coming for Ohio State. LJ he's 70 years old. He's on his way out in terms of his coaching career. Anybody who commits to Ohio State at this point on the defensive line, I think, is committing to Ohio State, and maybe even Jim Knowles as opposed to Larry Johnson. What do you think, Harrison?
I think most of the guys that come, they commit for LJ. I think that he really connects with guys.
At this point?
Yeah. I think I would put Lachlan in the same category. I think guys really respect him. They get into a room with him and they love talking to him. It's kind of talks like an uncle to you. I think that some guys just carry that respect with them, and a lot of young guys gravitate towards it. Now, yes, Ohio State has something to do with it. Like, I won't get that twisted. But I think that even though in the fan perception, LJ might be falling off a little bit, to these kids, he's still the same guy that they've always heard about.
Sure.
I think so. And the thing is, we as fans, we can all sit here and talk about the lack of production we see out of Jack Sawyer and Tuimoloau. Guess what? They're both going the top 2 or 3 rounds. They're both going to get drafted. And
no,
go ahead. What are you going to say?
I think some of the frustration that comes from Ohio State fans is the fact that they haven't had the big first round, guy in a while. There hasn't been a Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, Chase Young. None of those guys. And JT and Jack Stewart came in as 5-star kids. People expected him to be the next Chase Young.
I think they're both they're both top 5 recruits in the nation.
Yeah. I think JT was the top. He was the top overall recruit. I think Jack Sawyer was number 3 in the composite, and I think ESPN had Jack Sawyer number 1. So again, I think those expectations have kind of led Buckeye fans to wonder if LJ still has his fastball. Now, I do think part of it is Jim Knowles' system, and those two, I think there were some, let's just call it some disagreements between the two here earlier in the season. And I think after the Oregon game, that finally got settled. But, you disagreed with me in terms of who I think defensive lineman would come to commit for, whether him or the program. I think it's more of Ohio State in general and what they can do. But that's okay.
No, that's understandable. The brand is the brand.
Yeah, and that brand will be on full force here on Saturday, against IU. They're going to, they're going to need everything that they have for that game. So, do you have anything else you want to talk about here before we wrap up?
No, I did want to bring up Bogpin Miller. I did want to talk about
Okay.
him. So, from what I've heard, he's been balling out because he plays quarterback, and he's been balling out. I've heard he has some really good zip on the ball that in the playoffs when he was playing. But I mean, he got moved from 247 from 682 to 220. Now, for a lot of people outside the fan base, they might just call it a Buckeye bump as a wide receiver, and that's fine. But what do, what do you think about him as a prospect at Ohio State?
So his size, honestly, with his length and his body frame, he reminds me a little bit of Benjamin Victor. Victor was a guy who was taller. He was a little bit wiry. Didn't really fill out as much, but that's just kind of the build. Now, hopefully, Miller is a little bit more productive than what Victor was. Victor really had that one good, big play against Penn State, and that was kind of it. But I think with who they're surrounding him with in that room, I think they need a guy who has the size that he has, that can be a threat in the red zone, that can be a threat to kind of catch a jump ball,
Mm-hmm.
and really, really just be someone that they can, someone that knows how those guys play. And
Yeah.
Miller, you know, obviously he's not coming into, he's got that quarterback background, but he's not coming in to play quarterback. But his knowledge of how quarterbacks think, I think that'll help give him a little bit of an edge in terms of executing the routes,
Mm-hmm.
blocking out there in the run game, and things of that nature. Do I ever see him being a number one for Ohio State? No.
No.
But I could see him being a solid contributor, along the lines of maybe even like a Johnny Dixon, some guy who was solid, who never really, popped off the screen in terms of
Made
his
some big
stats.
plays.
Exactly, but a guy who can make big plays.
Yeah.
So, I think he's still got a bright future.
Yeah, and Steve, Jim Knowles runs the defense, period, point blank. I agree with that. And I was talking about my co-host Bryce on Scar and Blue Show, and I told him, I said, eventually, man, like is LJ not your subordinate? Is he not your subordinate? And in that case, I mean, it is on Jim Knowles. But there is
And I
one
think
head there's one person that falls onto the end of the day,
and
and that's
that's
Ryan
Ryan
Day.
Day. Yep.
And
Yep.
man, listen, I was in the Navy for 8 years, man. And in my mind, if someone's your subordinate, man, you don't have to, not disrespectfully, but you better treat him as such. Like I have nightmares from last year's game against Notre Dame when I saw that JT and Jack played every single snap.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when it comes to, this year I saw what Tyleek, I forgot what game it was. Tyleek had 68 snaps, and I'm sitting here wondering why is this fat behind on the field for 68 snaps. So like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and that's part of building that depth, and now they don't really
Mm-hmm.
have that depth back there, so they don't rotate as many guys. So, we'll have to talk about still with there. So